Space. And I'm your host, Sierra Hoffman. On today's call, we have Jason Lee. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Sierra, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Amazing. So, as usual, I always like to start off by understanding more about your story. So, tell us about your background, what you did before, and how did you get into commercial real estate?
So my background, I'm pretty young, so I came into real estate straight out of college. So I didn't have a long career before I got into commercial real estate. So my first career out of college was as a commercial real estate agent specializing in multifamily.
Hmm.
And prior to that, I was on my way to get my degree and become a doctor because Asian parents, that's what your parents want you to do,
Yep.
and that's what my mom said I was gonna do my entire life, but I had a quarter life crisis in college, couldn't do it anymore, and switched my major to the easiest major I could find so I could finish school, which was communication,
Hmm.
and I looked everywhere I could for a job, and I'm very lucky to have found, real estate because it fits my personality really well, and I've loved being in commercial real estate. So, yeah, that's how I got into it.
I love that. So I'm Asian as well, and I went through the same track as you, went to college. I actually did finish my Bachelor of Science degree, but that was the whole thing was like, okay, I got to go to med school because I have no other options. There was literally like growing up, that's the only option that there is. So I didn't really see anything. And I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. If I did, I probably would have tried something else, did something different. But it wasn't until I was maybe halfway through college that I learned a little bit more about what is this entrepreneurship thing and started to learn about that. So I love that story. And so how long ago was that when you went into the multifamily business?
Yeah, so that was beginning of 2018, so it's been about 5 years now.
All right. So right now you got into multifamily and you started off as a broker. Is that right?
Yeah, I cut my teeth as a broker, correct.
Perfect. Tell us more about your why. So how did you like stumble into multifamily and how did you transition from being a broker to then also investing in your own multifamily deals? A lot of brokers, they don't make that transition. They stay transactional.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think as a multifamily broker, you're always analyzing a lot of deals for your clients, you're always talking to investors, and I saw how much equity, how much money my clients were making that were the best investors, the most smartest, most
Mhm.
intelligent investors, so I was able to learn from them and see exactly how they were executing their business plan, what kind of properties they'd buy, where and why they'd buy something. So I asked a lot of questions. So I'd ask a lot of questions. I'd bring a lot of value, of course. I'd bring good deals to them. And then I'd take them out to coffee and basically ask everything I could. So I know a lot of brokers that are in my space. They just stick to being a
Mhm.
broker, they just make the commissions. But that's not the best way to build wealth because when you make commissions, especially in California, you get taxed 30, 40% on the
Mhm.
whatever you make.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get ahead if you don't own real estate because real estate is what hedges against taxes with depreciation, cost segregation. It wipes out your income. So I learned that early on. So I try to buy my first property as soon as possible. And it's eventually led to accumulating a portfolio and here in San Diego, and it's worked out really well. So anyone out there listening to the show, if you are some sort of salesperson, you got to save your commissions and invest in your first property as soon as possible.
I love that. Yeah, there's so many tax advantages getting into real estate. Obviously, it's a great way to build wealth, and I think the goal ultimately is to have that generational wealth as well. So, for you, is your goal to eventually just be an investor, or do you want to keep being a broker as well?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I definitely want to. So basically, JLM Real Estate, I started about 2 years ago. We are a commercial real estate brokerage here in San
Hmm.
Diego. And I have 9 agents who are all young, motivated individuals. And I found a lot of fulfillment in teaching and mentoring younger brokers that are trying to break into the space. So
Hmm.
I definitely want to keep doing that, keep being a mentor role model for younger brokers trying to get into the industry because it is tough. And yes, I do want to spend a lot of my time focusing on investments and keeping the portfolio growing and also getting into a little bit of development as well, which we're doing right now. But
Hmm.
yeah, definitely more on the principal side is my
Yeah.
focus in the future.
Awesome. You're pretty young. You've been at this for 5 years and already you have, you're a broker, you've got your own team underneath you, and you've got a good sized portfolio. Just tell us about what your portfolio looks like right now.
So we started buying in 2020, and my partner and I were 50-50. Didn't raise any outside capital, didn't raise money, and we have 115 units in San Diego, and the portfolio value is a little under $50 million. So the way we're able to do that, because a lot of people ask me how I did it without raising capital,
Yeah.
is I was able to partner with the perfect partner. So I was on the front end finding really good deals for below market value, and my
Mhm.
partner runs a hard money debt fund, a private money fund. And basically, he would get us really good debt, and I'd find the best deals, and we put 10 to 20% down on these properties, and then we'd sell them for a big profit and do a 1031 exchange a year later into bigger assets. So that's how we were able to grow pretty quickly.
Perfect. And so right now, tell us about where you're located because that obviously affects the market and things like that, just for our audience to know like where you're coming from.
I'm in San Diego County.
Perfect. And right now, I think with you being in the brokerage industry, talking to buyers and sellers every single day, you have that firsthand experience of what's happening in the market. So tell the audience what you're seeing right now as far as buyer and seller sentiment.
That's a great question. It's a very weird market. It's a very interesting time. I think right now, sellers in my market, at least, I don't know where outside of California looks like, but most of California sellers are still sticking to their guns. They're sticking to the high prices. They're not letting down because they have so much equity, and not a lot of people are in pain here in Southern California. A lot of people have a lot of equity and very little debt. And a lot
Hmm.
of them have rates under 4%. So why would they want to sell? So we're seeing very low inventory, not a lot of properties coming for sale, and we're not seeing any sellers trying to lower their prices. But on the buyer side, what's making it really tough is buyers are all looking for a really good deal. They're looking
Hmm.
for 10 to 20% below the highs of 2021, 2022. So that's making it really challenging to put deals together because the bid ask price is so far apart
Yeah.
that the market isn't moving nearly as much as it should. So to summarize, it's a very slow market. If you're a broker, it is tough right now. We're still
Hmm.
putting deals together, but it has to work out pretty well between buyer and seller. There has to be some sort of motivation on either side,
Yeah.
whether the buyer's in a 1031 or the seller has to sell. So if you don't have either of those situations, it's very hard to make a deal work right now.
Got it. And do you see that changing anytime soon? Do you feel like there's going to be any kind of movement that will move towards the buyer's favor?
It's got to shift one way or the other because there's a lot of people are always going to be buying properties. There's a lot of pent up demand. There's always people looking to invest.
Hmm.
And there's always sellers are going to sell because life happens, right? The three Ds: death, divorce, disease. Things will still move, but when things will open up, I think, is when either one, sellers got to feel more pain. So we'll see if that happens. If a lot of these loans coming due might cause more pain to happen, I don't know.
Hmm.
But the data doesn't seem to feel stacked that way. Or if rates go down, a lot of bankers that I talked to at First Republic, Chase Bank, at these big banks, such as another one I talked to, this big banker at Wells Fargo and Citibank, they all think that rates will lower a little bit, at least within the next 2 to 3 years. So that could also increase buyer demand. So it's got to go one way or the other. These lulls happen in real estate. There was a big lull when COVID first hit. There was a big lull coming out of obviously the last recession. So there's always that 1 to 2 year lull, but I'm sure transactions will open up in the next year or so. So I'm not too worried about it.
Perfect. And so you mentioned obviously you have a brokerage and you've got new up and coming brokers that want to get into this market and learn from you. And so for these people that are coming in maybe as a broker right now, what's your thoughts on is it a good time to start becoming a multifamily broker right now?
I think it's an amazing time because there's a lot of people that are actually closing down their businesses. There's a lot of people that are a lot of older brokers that are retiring. There's a lot of younger agents who simply don't have the grit to make it past the hard times. So the amount of brokers out there right now is so much less, even in residential,
Mm.
so much less than the highs of 2021. So with less volume, which means less agents. So it allows people like myself or someone new to come in and make those relationships that'll foster and build
Mhm.
into the next bull run. Yeah, I really think now is an amazing time to cut your teeth in real estate as a broker or as an investor. It's a great time to buy as well.
Yeah, and coming from the investor's point of view as well, what would you say to someone, because most of our audience is new to multifamily, maybe trying to get into their first deal, first couple of deals. And since you did mention that inventory, it's very difficult to find right now. So what would you say to those investors that are new and just trying to get, their foot in the door, gets their first deal?
My biggest advice would be to make relationships with people who are actively talking to potential sellers. So whether it's property managers,
Mhm.
brokers, lenders, loan brokers, whatever it is, make relationships with service providers who service investors because they're the ones who find out about deals before they come on the market. The problem with newer investors is that their mindset is pretty limited. They only look on LoopNet or CoStar or these online platforms. But the way to find the best deals is to find the deal before it gets shopped around by other investors and it comes online. LoopNet is where deals go to die. So you have to find the deal before it comes to market.
Mhm.
And the way to do that is to make relationships with key people who are actively talking to sellers in your market wherever you are.
Yeah, and coming off of that, let's say a newer investor is wanting to get into their first deal and build these relationships. How do they differentiate themselves from all the other buyers that are trying to get your attention? And as a broker, what's the key things that they can do to stand out and be able to build that relationship so when the market does turn in their favor and a lot more deals come, they've already got those relationships built up?
You would think that there's a ton of people reaching out to brokers every single week, but there really isn't. There's not a lot of buyers that reach out to me. It's mostly me reaching out to other buyers or other sellers. And I've been doing this for a little while now, and we've done a lot of transactions. My name's out there. We've done over 250 million. And even with all my listings, I barely get any buyers saying, hey, like picking up the phone and saying, hey, I'm looking for this property, this size, and I can afford this much. Like it's very
Mhm.
rare actually. So my number one advice to that person is to pick up the phone. There's so many people out there that send like scammy emails or texts
Mm.
that like make lowball offers on brokers' listings, but
Yeah.
having a real live person on the other side of the phone is so valuable. So if you're a new investor looking to meet a broker who's doing well in your
Mhm.
market, pick up the phone, call them, and show them that you're a real buyer. Show them that you have proof of funds or you have access to funds through other partners. Show
Mhm.
them that even if you've never done a deal before, be honest. Say, I haven't done a deal, but I'm looking for guidance. I have active people that are behind me that we've done our due diligence. We can afford this much. We want to get a deal done ASAP. That makes a broker want to work for you and want to go hunt for you. So I think being specific and picking up the phone is what I'd
Mhm.
say to a new investor.
Awesome. And what about meeting you for coffee? Is that something that has anyone ever talked to you? Hey, I'd love to take you out for coffee, maybe pick your brain and just get to know you on a face to face basis.
Yeah, that's also rare. So that's a great point. I think that's very helpful because then you get that face to face time with someone who's doing well in your market. I think the broker will try to rub you off if you don't come off as someone serious. So make sure
Hmm.
you come off as someone who's active, ready to go, wanting to buy something, and make sure that you don't like a huge mistake that new investors make is they'll have like their friend, like their cousin who's an agent, and they'll represent them on an off market property that a broker worked hard to find. And
Hmm.
that broker that found that deal will probably never work with you again because when a broker finds an off market deal, they've done all the
Hmm.
work. So they want to make all the commission. So if you
Right.
bring in your cousin who did nothing, they'll probably say, yeah, you'll probably never see a great deal from me again. So
Makes
that's
sense.
also one big piece of advice that's happened to me, happened to other brokers that talk about it all the time. If you have a broker that's finding deals, don't
Hmm.
bring in your agent who's done absolutely nothing.
Got it. What about on market deals? If there's a deal that's on market and they have a buyer's agent representing them, does that help? Does that deter that you from wanting to do deals with that person, or is it different for on market deals?
No, if it's on the market, it's fair game. So you can have anyone representing you, but I would highly recommend if you do have a buyer's agent and you're just getting started, I'd highly recommend using a buyer agent that's experienced in commercial real estate and does a lot of transactions. So The best way to explain this is if you work with a residential agent that's your friend that helps you find a commercial property, they're not going to bring any value to the transaction. They're not going to know how to negotiate the transaction. They're not going to understand the numbers. They're not going to
Mhm.
understand how to negotiate properly with the other side.
Yeah.
And on top of that, if you work with an agent who's not finding properties for the future, because I'm sure you don't want to just buy one, you want to buy more. You want to
Mhm.
work with an agent who's actively finding properties, who's doing a lot of deals. Have that person be your buyer's agent because if you have that person represent you, they're going to feel like they owe you a favor because they let you rep them on an on market property or go direct to the listing agent too. That helps too because there's no middleman and listing agents
Mhm.
like that. But if you
Yeah.
absolutely want your own representation, I'd highly recommend going with a commercial agent that's in your market.
Makes sense. So now I want to go into a deal walkthrough. So maybe you can tell us about a deal, maybe that you did with a client, or maybe the deal that you talked about earlier, and just tell us about maybe some pitfalls that happened, some learning lessons that our audience can take away from that experience.
I think the best deal that comes to mind is the first property I ever bought. The way I found it was I was just calling through a list of owners as a broker, and
Hmm.
this person recently inherited this property, and his property manager was going to list the property. And I asked him what price, and he said 750 for a duplex here in San Diego in a
Hmm.
nice area. It was a very cheap deal. So I called the property manager. I said I want to buy this property and I let him represent me. So we were in contract the next day.
Nice.
And when we went to escrow and we did our due diligence and our inspections, I come to find out that the entire property needed a new foundation. That costed over $150,000. I found out the property needs a new roof. The electrical was old knob and tube wiring, which is really old electrical that insurance companies and lenders will not lend on because it's very old, dangerous wiring. So I had to replace the electrical and I had to replace the plumbing because it was old cast iron. The property was built in 1920s. So I
Wow.
basically had to rebuild this property, and it was the first property I ever bought. And that was the scariest thing ever. I almost backed out, but the numbers were so good that I ended up moving forward. I
Yeah.
negotiated the price about $100,000 because all the unknown expenses that
Hmm.
I had coming into the escrow.
Yeah.
So I closed at around 630,000 and I spent about $400,000 on the renovation and I hired a contractor from hell. The
Yeah.
contractor was a referral, but from a client. So a quick learning lesson, don't trust all the referrals you get because this person was the worst contractor and he wasn't licensed. And I lost between this property and two other properties I bought right after that he was doing
Hmm.
renovations on. He basically took $80,000 and ran and never heard from him again.
Wow.
So that was a huge pitfall, but I was able to save it with a new, good, trained, licensed contractor who
Hmm.
managed the renovations and got it done. And I was still able to sell that first property for about, I think it was, no, sorry, I refinanced it and it
Uh-huh.
appraised at 2.1 million and I was into
Nice.
it for about $1 million. So I was able to pull out a lot of cash out and buy two more properties. Yeah, a lot of fails and successes in that one deal.
Yeah, and that just goes to show, like, you have to be prepared from the beginning, run the numbers, and make sure it's a good deal. If you have razor thin profit margins, then it's just when something happens and things come up like that, it's just gonna tank you, and you wouldn't be able to really invest in your next deal if you're losing money on the first one.
Exactly. Yeah, well said. That first deal is very important.
Exactly. So tell us about, has your investment strategy changed at all, or maybe your client's investment strategy? Are you noticing there changes at all in this current market?
Yeah, in this current market, so for the business plan, no, the kind of properties we're buying, it has not changed. We're still
Mhm.
looking to buy properties where we can add value to and increase the rents and buy it for X price and be able to refinance it for a higher price. So, no, that hasn't changed. It's gotten harder and harder because the market's really tight. But the good thing is that there's a lot less buyers out there. So even
Yeah.
though there's less volume, there's less competition that we're basically competing with. So it's both ends pulling in different directions. But same with my clients, a lot of my clients have actually taken a back seat. So a lot of them are seeing what happens, waiting to see where things go. It is a pretty uncertain time, so a lot of people are watching and waiting, but I do have 3 or 4 really good clients that are very actively buying, and they've done
Mhm.
very well this past year. So, yeah, it's honestly a great time to be a buyer because I've never seen it like this, like, uncompetitiveness. It's been a lot less competitive than the last 2 years.
Awesome. Are you noticing any shift at all towards people wanting to move their money or their assets over to out of state?
That's always been happening. So ever since I started, there's always people that get sick of California that leave, but there's always people that wanna buy in California too. So I feel like there's a lot more people wanting to buy here than leave
Mhm.
just because properties here the last 50 years have done so well since the start of times. California, it's the best land, even though the laws suck. If you look at rent control
Mhm.
and rent control in New York City, there's rent control in San Diego, LA, San Francisco.
Mhm.
Those cities are the most expensive markets, and rent
Yeah.
control sadly has an opposite effect because these lawmakers don't have a degree in economics, don't understand real estate. They're just
Yeah.
politicians, and rent
Yeah.
control actually increases the value of property significantly and lowers the rental market even more. So that makes the demand and supply in the landlord's favor, not the tenant's favor, and it actually
Mhm.
has a really bad effect. I talked to owners before rent control hit in San Diego. This was in 2018,
Mhm.
and no one was raising rents. If they were mom and pop owners, they had tenants paying rent, they were fine. The rents were really low. But now everyone when I talk to, they're raising rents 5, 10% every single year so they don't fall behind the rent control, AB
Right.
1482. So it really has an opposite effect. It's really sad. The way to solve the crisis in California is to build more
Mhm.
affordable housing, but
Yeah.
California makes it impossible to build housing. So
Mhm.
they're just shooting themselves in the foot. But it's good for landlords, but sucks for
Mhm.
people looking to have an affordable unit.
Got it. And you did mention earlier you're getting into development as well?
Yes, we have been just because we want to try to create more housing in California. We're building some affordable housing, some market rate housing, but yeah, that's definitely my next venture because there's so in San Diego, a stat came out that there's 70,000 people that need homes in San Diego that don't have access to it. And we're only building 5,000 a year or less. So the gap is only getting wider and it sucks. So
Mhm.
we have to definitely build more housing.
Got it. So sounds like there's some really good opportunity there for developers and investors to get into that market and help create more affordable housing for these people that obviously need it.
Exactly, yeah, and ADUs, I'm sure, are a really great opportunity because you can convert a two-car garage into a one-bedroom unit for about $120,000, and that will rent for 2,200 a month, so
Mhm.
it's a really great way to build wealth and also provide housing to potential tenants that need it.
I love that. All right. Tell us about what you're working on right now and what is next for you and your company.
This year, I've been focused on trying to help newer investors try to help them buy their first property.
Hmm.
So I've been pretty active on YouTube and social media and recently came out with a course about multifamily investing. So recently did that. But other than that, still just working on helping buyers and sellers, acting as a broker, trying to find more properties to buy and develop. But other than that, still just doing the same thing and continuing with the real estate career.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much for being on the show today. I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners have as well. It's great to hear things from a broker's perspective, which is new to us here on our show. I'd love for our audience to be able to have the chance to reach out to you. So, where can they find you online if they want to learn more about you and have a chat?
The best way to find me is my YouTube channel or my Instagram. It's just my full name, Jason Joseph Lee. So if you look me up on either of those platforms, happy to respond to a DM or a question and help you out. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Great. I'll make sure to include links to your social profiles as well as your websites in the show notes below. And thanks everybody for tuning in today. If you guys enjoyed today's show, please write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every review helps us to be able to reach more and more people looking to get involved in commercial real estate. If you're looking to level up your investment game, join the Commercial Real Estate Bosses community. It's completely free, and inside you will get access to our Passive Investing 101 Masterclass, as well as regular live trainings where you can ask questions, and access to industry professionals and like minded investors. Join for free today by going to crebosses.com/join. That's crebosses.com/join. Or click on the link below